Thank you for joining us at the Evolution of Medicine Summit. A warm welcome. We wanted to make a specific thank you to our sponsors that have made this event possible. Energetics, an innovative natural remedy and supplement company, is committed to revitalizing medicine, and Cyrex Labs, a clinical immunology laboratory specializing in functional immunology and autoimmunity. Most of all, thank you for listening. If you'd like to share this with your colleagues and friends on Facebook if you enjoy the content, and if you have questions, you can ask us on Twitter with the hashtag EvoMed. Finally, if you really want to play your part in accelerating the evolution of medicine, ask your doctor if the Evolution of Medicine Summit might be right for them. Thank you and enjoy. Hello and welcome back to the Evolution of Medicine Summit. This is your host, James Maskell, and today we're going to be talking about the evolution of men's health. And who else could I bring in than a good friend of mine, Dr. Geo Espinosa. Dr. Espinosa is a naturopathic doctor in New York. He has done TED Talks. He has a new book on prostate cancer called Prostate Cancer Thriver. Dr. Espinosa, it's so great to have you here on the summit, and really excited with what you're going to share with the group. I'm excited to learn as a man who probably needs some help as well. Thanks so much for being here.
Well, thank you. It's a pleasure to be here, and you don't look like you need a lot of help now, but you probably will at some point. So I'll be glad to share as much information as I can.
Well, you don't know that much about my journey, but I was once an extremely fat dude. So yeah,
I need to see pictures.
They've been whitewashed. they'll pop up sometime in the future, I'm sure. So look, your resume speaks of a man that is seriously passionate about men's health and very little else. What is it that drives this passion to help men?
Well, you know what, James? I guess there are two things primarily. The one thing is that we just need help, right? 50% of men, 1 out of every 2 men in the world, will get cancer. And not only prostate cancer, but bladder cancer. It's more prominent among men than women. Heart disease, is the number 1 killer in the world. More men die from heart disease than women. And men typically die about 8 years sooner than women.
8 years?
8 years. So women outlive us by 8 years. And that's not insignificant.
No, that's serious. Is that across the world, or is that in America?
That's across the world. That's average across the world. And America's about the same. It's about 8 years.
So it's interesting because when I speak to doctors and they're like talking to them, we used to have a marketing agent who would say, what's your target market? They'd say, oh, we're trying to get women in this age group because men don't come and see the doctor.
That's exactly right.
Is that basically what we're talking about here?
That's part of the reason. But to answer your first question, what's my drive? The second drive is the amazing results that I see clinically every single day. With men following, coming to me for integrative naturopathic medicine. And the fact that they get a zip back to their, they bring a zip back to their life. They reclaim and rebuild their life. And I'm not talking about older men. There's actually younger men that I would say have andropause, right? Which is like the female version of menopause.
Okay.
In other words, their testosterone levels are low. We're talking about 30-year-old guys, okay? Low testosterone levels, poor sexual function, big bellies, metabolic syndrome, the works. So they already have what 60, 70, and 80-year-old men should have. And I say that with a little tongue-in-cheek because actually men in their 60s and 70s shouldn't go through quote-unquote andropause either.
Yeah. So it seems like this is part of the evolution of medicine that we're dealing with at different types of diseases and different types of symptoms earlier and than we probably should be.
Oh, absolutely. Absolutely. If I tell you that more than 50% of my erectile dysfunction patients are less than 40 years old.
Wow.
Okay? So that's a big statement. More than 50% of my erectile dysfunction patients are younger than 40. So this is widespread. This is widespread throughout the world, actually, because I'm also writing a book currently, a textbook with a few other practitioners on the integrated medicine and sexual medicine.
Okay.
And we're doing research from around the world, and this is not only in the U.S., this is around the world as well. So this is highly unnatural. Why? Well, other than quality of life, the penis is a barometer to the rest of the body, right? So if men that are having poor erectile issues, other than them not being able to perform sexually, what else is going on?
Yeah.
When is the heart attack? When is that heart attack coming? When is that stroke coming? Because it's coming.
Is that a preemptive measure?
For sure.
Predictive measure?
It can be.
Okay.
It can be, right? Because the sexual dysfunction is a result of plaques in the arteries of the penis.
Yeah.
Where else are there plaques that we're not aware of?
Yeah, I can understand that.
Right.
So let's just go back and say, these are not diseases that we would have seen 50 years ago
Correct.
or more in this men of this age group. Is there actually a deterioration in men's health over and above? Like, are we living less than we used to? Is the quality of life going down?
Correct. All of the above. All of the above.
This must be the first time in human history that's happened.
Absolutely. Within the last 20 to 30 years, this is exactly what's been the case. And there's many reasons for that we can discuss. But the bottom line is that we're not doomed as a result of that. Again, clinically, I see amazing things happening. I'm talking about 80-year-olds gaining their sexual health back, being fit, having muscles.
Yeah.
And I'm not talking about the Cenogenics guy with the big muscles or anything, right? I'm talking about just regular guys, who are motivated to take action, follow certain protocols, naturopathic and functional medicine protocols, and do extremely well. Extremely well. It's just so fascinating to see. So I think a lot of what's happening can be resolved with lifestyle interventions, naturopathic and functional interventions that work very well.
So that's a great question for people who are listening there. Like, there's a lot of men's health. Well, there's not as many men's health gurus out there as women's health, but why do you think it's relevant that we should be speaking to a naturopathic doctor about the evolution of men's health?
Well, I think it's relevant for us to be speaking about any doctor who practices integrative and nutritional interventions as it relates to men's health, not just a naturopathic doctor. I think that one of the main benefits is because we look outside the picture. We look outside the box, that is, right? Patient comes in with a prostate problem. 90% of the times, you have to look outside of the prostate to help this patient with his prostate problem. You have to look at gut health. Do they have a leaky gut? If so, then they're going to have a hard time metabolizing and absorbing different herbals or botanicals or medications even, right? Perfect case in point, for example, younger men between the ages of 25 and 40, about 8% of these men suffer from something called prostatitis. That's inflammation of the prostate. A lot of pain in the pelvic area, urinary frequency, urgency, sexual dysfunction, etc. Most of these men, 90% of these men, also have irritable bowel syndrome. Studies are very clear. They show that men who address their irritable bowel syndrome, their IBS, oftentimes resolve themselves from their urological prostatitis and even bladder dysfunction problems. So there is a tight connection there. So we have to appreciate that the prostate, I joke around that I never have a walking prostate come to my office.
Yeah.
Right? It's a person, it's a man with a prostate. So in this particular case, as it relates to men, integrative medicine, when one appreciates the whole person, is extraordinarily important.
That's one thing that we're going to hear over and over again throughout this summit is just the age of medicine where every part of the body is separate is done.
It's done.
Yeah, it's done.
It's done. We're not getting results if we keep compartmentalizing, each body part. We're just not getting those. We're not going to get results. We haven't gotten results. Car accident, perfect. Go to the ER, MD. We need to focus in an acute situation. Chronic conditions, which is what I see.
Yeah.
Excessive enlargement of the prostate. I have a patient from California with a humongous prostate who wakes up 4 to 5 times a night to urinate because of his prostate being so large. Well, what happens there? Well, his sleep, he has sleep problems as a result, right? Well, if you have sleep problems, that triggers a bunch of other things. Low testosterone, fatigue, chronic fatigue, irritability, problems with their spouses, etc., etc., etc. So if we can look at this person from a holistic perspective, his waist circumference, right? So metabolic syndrome and a big waist, big waist size contributes to enlargement of the prostate. Why? Because there's too much estrogen in the body.
Huh.
So while we thought that, wait a minute, maybe testosterone is what triggers an enlarged prostate and even prostate cancer. Well, new data is actually showing the opposite. It's showing, well, maybe testosterone is not a factor, but maybe too much estrogen in a man's body is a factor. Well, why is that happening? Because men get fatter as they get older. Well, the more fatter you get, the more estrogen you produce. This is how looking at the bigger picture really has a significant impact in bringing health back in a man's life.
Well, that's awesome. And, you will hear this all the way through the summit, is that we need to stop looking at the body as compartmentalized. So what are the things that actually draw men into the office of a physician? Because I know for myself, and I know that it's basically like you just wait until the last possible moment, and then it's really when it gets acute that you go and do something, but you're sort of like, take any sort of other medication or otherwise to avoid the doctor altogether.
Right.
What are the types of conditions that actually end up bringing in, or is it just like normally the wife or the girlfriend says you got to come? What's triggering an interaction with the medical system up until now?
It's typically the diagnosis.
Okay.
For every 25 patients I see, and of course most of my practice is male patients, one comes for prevention. Okay, and that's a sad truth. However, it turns out, for example, in my patient population with prostate cancer, and part of the book, my book, which is Prostate Cancer Thriver, Not Only Survivor, is that prostate cancer is an opportunity. It oftentimes does not kill patients, and it gives them an opportunity to reevaluate their life, their priorities, and to actually do things, to live a better life, because they oftentimes they would probably die of a heart attack if they don't take proper measurements. So prostate cancer brings them into the office. Now they're ready to do whatever I ask them to do. So the more severe the diagnosis, the more life-threatening it is, the more they're willing to come in and actually take action. And even for patients with erectile dysfunction, that's a pretty severe condition for men, because their penis is oftentimes, the most important thing for them. So that's almost life-threatening, although it's really not, right? But that's a big enough problem when you have a 28-year-old that has a bad experience where he cannot function sexually. That's as bad as, prostate cancer, at least in their head.
Yeah, no, I can definitely appreciate that. So let's talk a bit about prevention and preventative health, because one of the goals of this summit is to be able to, reach out to people who may not have had any interaction with the holistic medical system at all, who think that prevention, maybe is just eating broccoli or whatever
Hocus
it might
pocus
be.
stuff.
But there is a lot of research and a lot of more work happening to see that there are natural ways and natural methods that you can use to get the body back to optimal health, and that includes a lot of different factors. So, what do you see as some of the best preventative measures that men can start to take to start to avoid the chances of ill health?
I think a doctor's visit at least once a year helps. Now, I get it, right? Men don't like to be in a vulnerable situation. They try to avoid that at all costs. I get it. And particularly with conventional doctors, you get poked, you get your finger up the rectum to check the prostate, all uncomfortable, it's not joyous. They don't want to face the potential truth, etc. I get it. But I think that if general population don't know that we exist, right? So bringing about awareness with what you're doing here with this fabulous summit, and other platforms that raises awareness, I think men are more, and the internet has revolutionized it to the point that, there are more men coming in because they were able to find us, right? Men would welcome a practitioner who thinks outside the box, who's integratively minded, who's more holistic minded. So I think visiting these doctors where we can look at, for example, the bigger picture. We look at, we look at lab work, for example, very thoroughly. We look at hormonal levels. We take, we have our own type of physical exam that it's more nutritionally oriented. I think that would be the first step, first really good step for preventative approaches.
Yeah, that's great. So, what do you see as driving these? What are the causative factors that are driving all of these issues for men?
Yeah.
Generally, what are the factors that are driving this? Living fewer years, having
Yeah.
less, less quality of life.
Right.
What's driving that?
Less proactivity.
Okay.
Number one. Number two, we cannot undermine the impact that stress has on us, right?
Okay.
I practice what I preach, but I still have 3 kids.
Okay.
Okay, and I have a busy clinic, and I'm writing a book. I'm a blogger. I'm an involved dad, right? So it gets to be a lot after a while, right? So what do? Well, you need certain practices so that you can be able to be productive in all those areas and not sacrifice your health. So I think some level of structured knowledge where men can say, "Well, I could do that." Right, certain practices will be very helpful. So men don't do that. Men typically just keep their foot on the pedal and don't let go. And oftentimes, part of the problem I find is that men don't really love what they do for a living, and I think that could be very toxic. Not loving what you do for a living. I hit the lotto tonight. I'll be back in the office tomorrow morning.
Wow.
Right?
Yeah.
So
Me too.
you too, right? I mean, we're creating change. Now, I see a lot of men that's not the case. They make truckloads of money, but they really dislike what they do. They actually hate what they do. And I think that's problematic, right? The other thing is dietarily. So when you're stressed out, and I like to start with stress because when you're stressed out, you tend to do all the wrong things. So when you're stressed out, you don't wake up in the morning and say, "You know what? I need a good bowl of broccoli today."
Yeah.
Right? That's not what you do.
No.
You either drink too much,
Yeah.
or you smoke too much, or you go for a big bowl of pasta or some sort of carbohydrate and refined sugars that actually gets you to feel good for 5 minutes.
Yeah.
But then you crash, and then you don't feel good, and then you gain weight, and it's a downward domino effect after that. So that's a big part, and I don't want to make it overly simple, but also the lack of physical activity. Men are made to move.
Yeah.
And men are made to use as many muscles as possible. So not only should we move, but we should move a lot and push things and pull things to us. We should do weight resistance. So while running is a great exercise, and I do it all the time, a man needs to incorporate some sort of weight resistance, pushing and pulling. It's very important.
Yeah, we've actually got someone speaking later on in the summit, and he's a big fan of incorporating exercise more into into play.
Absolutely.
So actually getting to a point where exercise is not something boring that you have
Correct.
to do in the gym, but it's
Right.
actually just a part of your life. And he just feels that only type A personalities basically succeed in gym or CrossFit or whatever
Right.
they do because they are able to push themselves forward. Whereas most people, if it's not a part of their life,
Right.
it's just not going to happen.
If I had to give you one thing that men need to do to improve their health,
Yeah.
and again, not to overly simplify because it's a few things, is the importance of getting out of the comfort zone. Getting out of the comfort zone. The more you get out of the comfort zone, the healthier you'll be, the better you'll feel, the better your relationships, the more successful you'll be. I went through medical school. That's getting out of the comfort zone.
Yeah.
No one wants to go through medical school. In fact, most people, if they can, they would skip it and still become doctors if that was possible.
Yeah.
Why? Because it's grueling.
Yeah.
Well, you got to get out of the comfort zone to become a doctor, lawyer, anything, right?
Yeah.
Getting out of the comfort zone. You wake up in the morning. I always tell patients that in my speeches, that thing that you don't want to do that day, benching in a gym or CrossFit type of exercise or eating walnuts or drinking water, that thing that you don't want to do is exactly what you need to do that very moment.
Why do you think? Can you explain that?
You always have to fight your comfortability. You always have to fight. So things, oh, well, I should be eating walnuts, but I don't need. Well, maybe you need those omega-3 fatty acids, or the vitamin E, the mixed tocopherols vitamin E with high gamma tocopherol that you find in walnuts that has shown to be protective from a prostate perspective, from a cardiovascular perspective. Maybe that's exactly what you need. Well, you know what? Today, I don't want to do interval type of running. Well, do that because you're gonna feel better afterwards. The toughest thing is, stepping. That first step is the toughest thing. Once you get there, then you come back and say, "Well, thank goodness I did. I did that." I mean, we all go through it, right? We all go through it. I don't want to work out today. You go work out, you feel better when you come back.
Yeah. So how do you inspire this change? Because I can completely see what you're saying, and I completely agree with it, and I completely see, my life through those visions, and could certainly see that all the time. I think it's the same situation as I'm not going to do anything about it until it's sort of like impacting my life to a certain degree that like it's important enough for me to do about it. Obviously, this is not working for men, this whole strategy. How do we start to make easy steps towards moving in a different direction?
Act like you've been diagnosed.
Okay.
Right? Our minds are very powerful, right? So we can get in a state of mind like we were just diagnosed with prostate cancer, bladder cancer, or clogged arteries. We can get in that state of mind and actually get those feelings if we think hard enough. Our minds are that powerful. Act like if we already been diagnosed, because you will. If you don't take the proper approaches and actions, you will. As a result of just being a man, as a result of doing all the wrong things, as a result of you just not taking care of yourself, you will be diagnosed. Well, act like you're there now. So then what would I do if I'm diagnosed? I have a 42-year-old guy, he's 45-year-old guy, just diagnosed with advanced prostate cancer. I'm talking about he has 4 kids at home, 2 of them really young, and now this guy is facing his mortality for the first time ever. Advanced prostate cancer, the deadly type. Well, you know what? He's doing extraordinarily well as a result of this diagnosis. He's living his best life. I saw him for the first time 2 years ago. I just saw him recently, and his prostate cancer is in complete remission. He's lost 40 pounds. He has more energy than he had before. And you know what? His quality of life is actually better than it was before.
So it's like a wake-up call.
It's a wake-up call.
Yeah.
Hello.
Yeah.
I'm serious. It's all the time. So act, I guess for me it's easy, right? Because I see men diagnosed every day. So yeah. I'm reminded every single day. You know what? I'm going to work out right now. You know what? I don't like almonds. Now, let me tell you something, James. I got to tell you, I don't like broccoli. I don't like walnuts. You know what I like? I was teaching a class at NYU the other day, and we were talking about the importance of having breakfast. So a study from New England Journal of Medicine shows that if you have breakfast, that reduces your chances up to 30% of not having a cardiovascular problem, health problem, just by having breakfast.
Okay.
Because then you eat less throughout the day, et cetera, et cetera.
Yeah. So
one of the students asked me, so we were discussing, okay, what are the good breakfasts to eat? Well, it's important to eat protein and no carbohydrates for breakfast, particularly.
Okay.
So good protein, et cetera. And that's just a general rule of thumb. So one of the students asked me, well, Dr. Espinosa, what do you want to eat for breakfast? What do you like to eat for breakfast? I said, well, what I like to eat for breakfast? Yeah. It's a bagel with cream cheese and salmon and capers and olives.
Yeah.
Everything bagel.
You're a real New Yorker.
I'm a real New Yorker.
Yeah.
Now, so I'm a real man. Yeah. In every sense of the word, in terms of I like all the bad stuff too. And I don't necessarily love, I do love exercising, but I don't love vegetables. I like pizza, I like hamburgers and french fries.
Yep.
Right? That's what I like. Now, what I do is completely different. Why do I take such action? Well, I look at my kids every day.
Yeah.
Right? And I know that I can die at this point in my life if I don't take care of myself. I know it. Why? Because I see it all the time.
Yeah.
So again, to your question, what do we need to do? Man, just act like you've been diagnosed. Because if you haven't, you will.
Wow. I mean, it seems like a good strategy. I haven't really heard that before, but it makes a lot of sense to, to start thinking that way, because this is probably a different thing than women. Like, compare that strategy to what a woman would do. It's a different strategy, right?
It's different because women are just more proactive. They go to their gynecologists. They go to their doctors. They go to their integrative doctors. They follow through better. They take whatever supplements is suggested by their doctors. They just take maybe it's a motherly instinct. I'm not quite sure. I haven't pinpointed it yet. Maybe I asked a friend of mine, Doc. He's a doctor. I said, why? What is it? Why does it take us so long to take action? Why oftentimes we don't even take action? He says, because men have testicles and women don't.
Let's say that's anatomically accurate. Well, it's interesting you say that because it's almost as though the way that medicine is moving is that we have to have more of a matriarchal medical system where people have to take care of themselves rather than a patriarchal system, which is what we've had up until now.
That's actually a good point. Yeah.
Because the patriarchy works in acute disease.
Right.
That's why a lot of men were doctors, and it was a very male-dominated thing. And maybe that's the type of medicine that men came up with, is that you've got to see an issue and then you got to deal with it when it gets to the side of the symptoms. Whereas what we're seeing now is that because chronic disease isn't like being hit by a bus, it builds up over time. We got to get back to the cause. That's actually a more sort of female way of behaving, but it seems like it's a bit more healthy.
It is a bit more healthy, and I definitely see changes. As I lecture throughout the country, educating doctors, they are seeing more and more men. So there is light at the end of the tunnel, because there are more men that are being proactive and they're figuring out, wait a minute, I don't want to go to the MD or the urologist, but I do want to go to this integrative guy who does things differently. And more practitioners are starting to see more and more men in their practices now. Yeah. Baby boomers are not accepting aging. Yeah. They're not accepting health problems. They're not accepting ill health like they saw with their own father, who at 60 was like this, and at 70 he was hunched and having prostate and this, like that. They just accepted erectile dysfunction because I am 70, of course. No, that is far from the truth right now. Now the baby boomers are actually changing the whole paradigm. So things are, and that's why I guess my practice is as busy as it is, and even other practitioners are pretty busy, at least more than ever, seeing more men in their clinics.
Yeah, it's really interesting. So what about drugs? Because if you live in America, you always
the
see
legal
drugs.
ones or the illegal ones?
The legal ones that you get on TV, because there's a Flomax advert and there's this and that, and it all looks a lot of like old guys, wanting to have better erections together. This is where men are turning, mainly. Now, when people turn in that direction, what is the short-term value and what is the long-term prognosis of being on those drugs?
So, presumably, you're talking about the erectile drugs like Cialis, Levitra, and Viagra, and things like that. On one end, James, I don't have a huge problem with these drugs. It turns out that in 1998, when Viagra came out, more men started saying, hold on, raising their hands, I actually do have a problem. Before then, it was a hush-hush thing, right? They were not mentioning to anyone that they had a problem, certainly not to their doctors. Yeah. And again, that kind of information is actually very important. I need to know if you're getting an erection just from a health perspective. So, because of Viagra, and they created the diagnosis of, erectile dysfunction as opposed to impotence, because who really wants to be impotent? Yeah. But I can have erectile dysfunction. Yeah. Right?
That was a subtle name change.
Right, correct. Yeah. Correct. So...
Or ED.
Or ED, even better, right? Even better. So now men are saying, okay, I have ED. So I don't have a huge problem with these drugs. They do have side effects, but they work oftentimes. Here's my problem. My problem is that these drugs at best are a Band-Aid approach. If a man is not having successful erections, again, something else is happening. And if we continue doing the Band-Aid approach, this man is going to have some real ill health situation occur within a short period of time. Happens all the time.
Well, like you said, if it's a barometer, you're not reading the barometer.
Correct. Yeah. Correct. Where's the root of the problem? Well, you're not addressing it. Number two is that these drugs do not come without side effects. There's blurred vision. There's headaches and so on, and so back pain. So they don't come without side effects. Number three, and probably most importantly, oftentimes men would say, well, I I do get an erection, but it doesn't feel natural. Like the head of my penis is actually desensitized, so it's not even enjoyable. It's just like I'm going through the motions. My organ feels like it's detached from my body. These are all common complaints that they have. So while, they get an erection and a firm one enough to penetrate, it's not enjoyable, oftentimes. So that coupled with, do you have metabolic syndrome, or do you have potential diabetes? What else is going on here? So not addressing the cause leads to further problems. So it sends mixed messages to a man that they can just take care of their problem with a pill.
Yeah, absolutely. And can you just talk a little bit, because I've often thought about these waves of diseases and thought about, I through these summits and understood about cholesterol.
Correct.
So cholesterol is the master substance that all of these hormones are created from.
Yeah.
Is this wave of erectile dysfunction basically just based on a lot of issues, or is it a sort of just a natural endpoint from the fact that everyone's been trying to lower cholesterol or using statins to lower cholesterol? Is there just not enough cholesterol to go around to make these hormones?
That's actually a very astute question. Are you sure you don't have a medical degree and you're hiding it from all of us?
Well, I mean, these are the kinds of things that I think about. Maybe I'm weird, but I'm just like, if everyone's lowering cholesterol. When I went to my first medical conference and I saw cholesterol, I was like, cholesterol's the bad thing, right? That you get heart disease. And then I was like, hey, look it's there on the top of the hormone tree. That didn't make sense.
I'm very disappointed with the way we're overly prescribing statin drugs. As a whole, I say we because I'm part of the medical establishment. So what typically a lot of physicians that are not holistic and integrative would do is, they would say, well, the lower the better, right? The lower your cholesterol levels, the better. And I think that's been catastrophic.
Yeah. Particularly
with men. Because as you so correctly mentioned, cholesterol is a very important molecule. It's the main molecule that makes testosterone. So oftentimes what you see with men that are on high dosages of a statin drug, that they then develop really low levels of cholesterol, is that they have low levels of testosterone. And once that happens, it leads to fatigue, irritability, heart disease, erectile dysfunction, belly fat, etc., etc., etc. So absolutely, I think one of the big health problems we have is that it is the over prescription of cholesterol lowering drugs, where in some cases it may be necessary, but oftentimes is not in other cases, and it's actually doing more harm than good. And no one is really talking about this.
And do you see that sort of consequential diagnosis of, I started doing statins 3 years ago and now I'm here with my ED?
ED, low testosterone, I don't feel well, a little fatigue. Yes, absolutely. Absolutely. Again, what would the mainstream doctor do? Not look at all that. They would just prescribe them one of the drugs.
Yeah.
So we're missing the point. We're missing the point. Not only are we not necessarily helping them to prevent a heart attack by overprescribing statins, but their quality of life is significantly diminished when their cholesterol levels are too low.
And you get into an issue with polypharmacy at that point, because there's no scientific data on taking statins and erectile dysfunction drugs together. These aren't studies that are being done. You're in your own pharmaceutical experiment at that point, right?
It's too much of a wealthy drug category of drugs, to fight this. It's very difficult to do. I saw online yesterday the 5 most sold items ever in the history of the world. 5 most sold items in the history of the world.
What are they?
I remember a couple of them. The iPad was one when it first came out. Star Wars, the movie.
Okay.
And Lipitor.
Yeah, that doesn't surprise me.
$140 billion sold with Lipitor.
Wow. That's crazy.
So how do you fight that? It's just too much power. But, again, the internet helps because we're able, I'm a blogger, right? So I'm able to set out the truth and put out the truth, and so are many other great bloggers and writers. So the internet, although at times it could be misinforming, there are other times where people have the ability and use that platform to spread out good information.
Well, that's part of this evolution of medicine as well, is this availability of all information. People laugh at what information is available on the internet, but also every scientific study that's done is available on the internet. Like, people are looking at this information. This information is available now. In the old days, this information was only available to doctors.
Correct.
And then doctors would selectively learn it,
right,
and then two, selectively communicate it out to patients. So the amount of information that was actually getting to your average patient was basically zero. You're living in the dark ages.
Absolutely.
Now you don't have to listen to the dark ages, live in the dark ages. It's a choice to live in the dark ages, and it does certainly feel like, as a population, maybe patients are getting ahead of doctors because information is getting ahead of practice.
Right. Correct. Absolutely. I couldn't agree with you more. Yes, lay people have to learn how to navigate through the internet and find valuable information versus information that's not really helpful or misinforming.
Yeah.
However, good information is out there. And it's available to us. Toyota Corolla is one of the top selling items in the history as well. It's all coming back to me.
Yeah. So you got your average dude, driving in his Toyota Corolla,
popping Lipitor with his iPad on the side, causing havoc, and maybe watching Star Wars movies.
And stuff. So that's your average person there. I mean, it sounds about right.
Right.
So what's the way back for men? Like, how do we get to a point where we can actually be living as long as women? I know we're all pretty competitive, so we'd probably like to outlast them eventually.
Right, exactly.
What has to happen, clinically for each of us, but also, as a culture, what is that cultural shift that is going to happen for men for us to compete in living longer than our spouses?
Right. Acknowledgement of the fact that there's a lot of amazing integrative practitioners out there, and I think men should seek out these integrative practitioners that are doing phenomenal work. Number two is, again, act like you've been diagnosed. Men that have been diagnosed typically are more compliant. They're more compliant with any protocol versus men that just come for prevention. So act like you've been diagnosed. That's number two. Number three is always think about, write what's really important in your life. What's really important in my life today? What's the most important thing in my life today? Well, I have 3 kids. That's really important to me. Oftentimes, for other men, it's their spouse. Oftentimes, it's their mission in life. Oftentimes, is, this is very deep, James. Oftentimes, I ask my patients, I have the magic wand, is in my drawer, and I'm going to pull it out, and I'm going to wave it, and once I wave it, you're going to be 100% healthy. You're not going to have any problems. No prostate cancer. You're going to be slim. You're going to have a lot of energy. What are you going to do with that health once you have it?
That's so interesting. It's really connecting patients to their why.
The why is the most important thing. The why gets me up at 5 a.m. to go to the gym.
Yeah.
Do I want to sleep? Yeah, I want to sleep.
Yeah.
But I need to exercise because, my kids need me and my patients need me. I love what I do. My wife needs me. I enjoy life. The why is the driver.
Yeah, that's certainly something that, we see is that, you to engage someone with their why is, I guess prostate cancer.
It's the C word.
Yeah.
It's the C word.
Any diagnosis is engaging you with a new why, even if it's fake.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Absolutely.
Because I want to live the next 5 years or 10 years, or whatever it might be.
Exactly. And oftentimes patients have whys, but you know what is interesting? Sometimes they don't.
Yeah.
Sometimes they don't, right? For many reasons, but sometimes they don't have enough whys, and so then that's a whole different conversation.
Yeah. Well, that's part of the holistic understanding as well, because sometimes you need to, help to develop a new why.
Absolutely.
And that's the value, I think, of being in you talked about finding an integrated practitioner, and I say people could probably say you're biased because that's what you do, but, you see what happens if you can draw someone or help someone to find that why. that can be a catalyst for so many different things.
Absolutely, because integrative practitioners, what they do very well is they customize and tailor a protocol.
Yeah.
Right. But you do the protocol. I don't do the protocol for you. This is the protocol that's personalized, but you still have to do it. And so there's no magic bullets here, right? And so the driver, what gets you motivated is those whys. That's what get you going. That's why when you go to a restaurant, you choose, perhaps some fish and broccoli as opposed to, fettuccine alfredo.
Yep. Yeah, I can see that. I mean, there's going to be a lot more people in this summit who are going to talk about the details of nutrition and how to reduce your stress and how to reduce your toxic load and all those kind of things. But I think what we're really getting into is the core of what it's going to take to really be healthy. And I think that there's a lot of resources out there, but this is the minor stuff is doing what you need to do. The major stuff is getting into a position where you see the value in doing it, because in this new medical system, you have to want to do it, because you can
Ultimately, absolutely.
You can have fettuccine alfredo 3 meals a day, 5 meals a day, sitting on your couch at home, and no one's going to come and bother you, and you can do that. But that's not health, and that's not generating health.
No, the opposite is true, and if you want a quick way out, that's exactly what you would want to do, and it's actually very interesting. I tell patients always, look, if you do all these things, it's not as easy as you just drop dead like that and that's it. Life doesn't quite work that way oftentimes. It's a long, dreadful, slow period of very poor quality of life, and then you go. Yeah. Right? Had one patient come to me about 3 years ago. He says, I asked him, what are you here for? He says, I'm here because I think you can help me die fast. And I was confused. I said, sir, maybe you haven't read my bio and what I do, but my intention is to help men live longer and healthier. He says, oh, well, you don't understand. Healthy people die quickly, just like that. Boom. Unhealthy people die slowly.
Yep.
Dreadfully.
That's interesting.
So he certainly opened my eyes.
Yeah, no, that's a really interesting point. So, one thing that we're going to hear about throughout this summit is some of the strategies that, doctors or otherwise are using to be able to gain community as a parting point. And I just want to speak about this with regard to men, because groups of women are extremely supportive of each other.
Sure.
But necessarily, I'm not sure if groups of men are particularly healthy as far as, it's almost like a peer pressure to have another beer or eat a burger or whatever. What do you think about all of that? Like, how do we access community in a healthy way for men? Or is it just that their community maybe just needs to be their family when it comes to health and not other men?
Men have a problem with exposing any level of vulnerability to other men.
Right? Alpha male.
The alpha male at all costs. There's no way I'm going to let anyone know what I'm really going through. And I always joke with my younger men who are suffering from erectile dysfunction, whose friends always say, kind of brag about how well they do in bed. And I tell them, well, those are the guys that are doing more poorly than you are.
Yeah.
Are the ones that are bragging the most. In my world, as it relates to prostate cancer, I am certainly developing a certain community of prostate cancer thrivers, right? So because of our diagnosis, we are doing better. We're going to make all the right decisions. And I am connecting with the retreats that I run it's called the Capitalist Retreat for prostate cancer patients. It's a certain level of camaraderie where men get together and they support each other, not in a doom and gloom situation. Oh my God, we have prostate cancer and the treatments were horrendous and the side effect. No. None of that. What do we do to improve our lives right now? What actions do we take? Let's go join this race, this 3-mile race, and do that. 5-mile race in Central Park. Let's challenge each other. Let's get fitter. What are we going to do to get fitter? So I think, once again, the diagnosis, unfortunately, helps in men, and hopefully that will change with time, and hopefully I can play some role in that. But at this very moment in time, oftentimes the diagnosis helps a lot with, developing these groups of proactive men that are, want to live their best life.
But I have seen, some green shoots of change. I've certainly seen, like, the wife and the children get healthier, and now the dad's part of the crew and like getting on with it, and there's that force from that. And I have certainly seen that people being a good example. I think people maybe men especially don't like to get told what to do.
Yeah, that's right.
But if they see an example of someone else, then. And they do it. I was just this weekend. I was speaking to Joe Cross from Fat, Sick, and Nearly Dead, and he was saying the same thing. He was like, no one really cared until I did it, and then they loved the fact that I did it. But if I had told them what to do ahead of time, they weren't really responsive to it. So it's almost like you have to set a good example.
Yeah. The whole idea of, men participating in healthy activities with their families and spouses, I've seen is a 50-50 thing from my experience. Some men, maybe it's just a dynamic of the relationship. Some men don't want to participate in these kind of activities with their spouses for perhaps theoretical reasons that we can discuss at some point. Others do. Others have a great bond and they go to the gym together and so forth. Maybe they don't want it. Maybe they go to the bench press and they can't even bench press the bar alone without any, plates, and so they don't want to be vulnerable in front of their spouse or things like that. I see the opposite, just like you mentioned, men participating with their kids, etc. I really believe that, and observation and some of my research, that baby boomers are just once again changing the game here.
Okay.
They're changing everything. They go to the gym. You see, they're fit. They're muscular. Part of that reason is because the divorce rate is so high, right? So they're out and about, back in the scene, trying to date and be young again from that perspective. So they're being more proactive as well. That's one motivating factor for them. But all in all, they definitely are taking the bull by the horn, if you will, and making changes.
So if we were to sum up everything that you've said, it's basically you either just need to pretend or to tell yourself that you have prostate cancer or get divorced.
I didn't quite look at it that way, but maybe you're right. Maybe you're right. Maybe that's the summary of our conversation today.
Well, I think it's a healthy conversation. Hopefully, men will be into listening because it is a conversation. Look, there's a lot of very earnest and great information that you can get from anywhere else, right?
Right,
you can go and you can look on your blog. There's lots of great information, but there's a lot of other people that are writing about best health or diet or exercise, and those principles are sound. We're going to hear about people eat more plants and not as many and not as much junk food. That's the same for men as everything else. But I think what we're trying to do today is just really get to the core of why are men so far behind? It's kind of embarrassing.
It is embarrassing.
But we need to sort of usher in a new paradigm, and I hope that some of the conversation today is at least stimulating to men to start thinking differently, because that's what's going to have to start this this evolution.
You know what? If men are downloading this program, you have to assume they have some level of interest. They just need a little bit of guidance and a little roadmap of what they need to do. Right? Because why else would they come to this amazing program and download this? So I'll be interested in knowing, how this particular segment compares to all the other ones.
Yeah, no, I'm sure we'll be able to get statistics on that, and I'll let you know. So I think it's been a great session. So I've asked every guest that I've had on the summit,
right,
to just when I say the words "the evolution of medicine," what does that mean to you? Like, how do you interpret that? How do you feel about the evolution of medicine?
Wow, what a question. Very deep question. Profound question. The evolution of medicine, what does that mean to me? That means to me certainly that our healthcare system is in shambles right now. In many ways, it's the most expensive in the world. We're not getting great results. In fact, our mortality rate is pretty high. We rank 33 in the world in the United States. There are some countries above from us that I never even knew existed. I only see the flags during the time of the Olympics, for example.
Yeah.
These are, even beyond my area of expertise, but infant mortality, birth rates, deadly birth situations are also very high. You would think that happens mostly in third world countries, but no, the infant mortality in this country is actually very high as well. So what does the evolution of medicine mean to me is the work that you're doing. This whole idea of, no, we're changing the game here. Medicine used to mean that, but now it means this. And medicine means looking at the whole person, not just the sum of its parts. Medicine means appreciating the whole mind-body aspect, looking outside of the box with patients. They come in with a heart problem, you look at the whole body. Medicine means, perhaps even appreciating the placebo effect a little bit more, as opposed to fighting the placebo effect and trying to undermine it. And, medicine means that the growth of naturopathic medicine, the growth of functional practitioners, functional medicine practitioners, where, it won't be that difficult to find these doctors throughout the country and throughout the world. So that's what the evolution of medicine means to me, all these wonderful platforms to spread the word and for us to have the ability to do good work for our patients.
Absolutely. Well, I appreciate you sharing that, and I really enjoyed our discussion and the opportunity to be able to share this information with women and men alike. And I hope that together in the work that we do ongoing from here, that we can find ways, whether it be through through accessing it through comedy or accessing it through other different ways, to really put a sort of a fire underneath men to want to be healthy, because it's really, I think it starts with that desire, and then everything else is figure outable. Once you have that desire, then you can work out, you can read, you can see a practitioner, whatever, but it just has to start with some desire there. And I think that if we're waiting for symptoms, we're really feeding into that patriarchal model. And we're just not gonna thrive as a species. We're doing damage right now that we might not walk away from, and it's gonna take a serious change in culture to do it.
For sure.
And I appreciate your work in doing that.
Yeah, once you have the why, then I can show you the how. But I can't show you the how without you having that why. So, thank you. It's been a pleasure really speaking with you about these topics that are obviously I'm very passionate about.
Yeah. Well, this has been the Evolution of Medicine Summit. drgeo.com, is that the spot?
So, thank you. So it's, Dr. Geo, drgeo.com, drgeo.com, drgeo.com. Thank you very much, James.
And look out for the book, Prostate Cancer Thriver. That's coming out soon.
Yep.
Dr. Geo Espinosa, he's lecturing all over the world. You can check out his TED Talk, and it's been great having you on here. And we'll see you next time at the next session.
Great.
This is the Evolution of Medicine Summit. I'm your host, James Maskell, and we'll see you next time.